NJ.com and the Star Ledger welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start chopping.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Steve Politi here. I'm trying to be much calmer in this episode. I had a friend listen to our last episode and said, I was worried that one of you guys was going to have a stroke. I guess we got a little fired up last week. Who knew? So let's take it easy here. Come on.
That's good.
It's just college basketball. Rutgers 60.
It's just the most disappointing season in the history of the Rutgers athletic department. Guys, it's not that big a deal.
Don't stir me up already. I said I was going to take it easy on the Rutgers Rant. I'm going to call it the Rutgers Relax. The Rutgers Relax. Welcome to the Rutgers Relax. All right, 66-63 loss to Michigan. I don't know. I mean, it's just like it seemed like I finally figure out the defense, get 15 offensive rebounds against a team that's much bigger up front and can't hit a shot. Womp womp. It's like the story of the season, Mace Bailey gets all the double teams and pass it out, and other than Jermichael Davis, they just had no offense. I mean, it's as simple as that, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, Dusty May is one of the smartest coaches in college basketball, and he showed that acumen by figuring out that if you double Rutgers basketball's best player when their other good player is on the bench and can't play, nobody else can hit a shot. Rutgers,
like Dean Smith over there. That's James Naismith himself. This guy,
it's unbelievable, right? And this is a game where Rutgers had Jermichael Davis, a guy who entered the day shooting 22% on threes, a guy who every time he rises up for a shot, the entire rack kind of shrinks into itself, begging, why would you take that shot? He goes 4 of 7 on threes. He hits almost as many threes on Saturday as he had the entire season. He had 6 in the first 20 games. And they still only hit 10 threes despite having wide open looks. By design, Dusty May said, essentially, that's what we said. We're not going to let Ace Bailey beat us. We're going to double him every time he catches the ball, no matter where. And someone else is going to have to make the shots. If we lose to Jermichael Davis and Tyson Acuff making threes, so be it. That's the optimum strategy for Rutgers, against Rutgers, and I think it's repeatable, right? Like, this is the dangerous thing now, that Rutgers is going to have to adjust, because every smart coach from now on, I mean, I thought it was crazy Chris Collins didn't do this at Northwestern. I was befuddled by the fact that he was, and especially now that it's coming out that his best defender, Brooks Barnheiser, was playing on a broken foot and had to retire or end his college career because his foot was so messed up. I was amazed they didn't double him. Right. And now Dusty May figured it out. And now every other competent coach is going to figure it out. And I mean, look, Zach Martini went 1 of 4. PJ Hayes went 1 of 3. They need more from those guys. But they need more from everyone else, too. And then this was a game defensively, like they got the home court advantage where they were beating they were just beating the shit out of Michigan, if we're being honest. I mean, Vlad Golden was getting shoved all over the place. Zach Martini was about to throw him down on the wrestling mat the half the game, and nothing was being called. And they were forcing steals and doing what they had to do defensively, and they still lost.
Yeah,
it's one step forward, 3 steps back. Like they shoot great at Northwestern. Maybe it's just not as great of a team as Michigan. Whatever, the strategy wasn't as great, but to shoot that well at Northwestern and then just completely fall off the cliff a few days later, it's just really epitomizes the season, right? There's zero consistency on this team, top to bottom, and that's been the biggest flaw, right? Like. Every single one is accountable at some point. Struggling. Ace Bailey obviously was one of the main guys against Michigan. So it's just the inconsistency that has just stacked up time and time again. So that's really kind of summing up the season, what you saw in those 2 games.
It's interesting. And I get that there's a narrative online now that Rutgers wins that game with Dylan Harper, and maybe they do win that game with Dylan Harper. I do wonder, I come back to this though. Is it a coincidence that their best defensive effort comes without Dylan Harper? I mean, it's a question you have to ask.
This is the Rutgers Relaxed episode.
I'm just putting it out. So I mean, you can't, but you just can't say, oh, they would have won with the game would have been different if Dylan Harper was out there. It would have been higher tempo. They would have played differently. I think yes, they probably would have won the game. It was a 3-point game, the 8-point game late. Probably would have won that game. But you just can't say that one for the other.
Sure.
And the frustrating part, I guess, Brian, I come back to this, is like, they would have won that game if the players they thought they brought in to do these specific roles could do these roles. Like Zach Martini hit a shot. PJ Hayes hit a shot. Like these guys, I mean, that's part of it. That's wide open looks. He's passing them up. a lot. I don't know, it's just a frustrating thing.
I'm not going to fall into this trap of the SEC fans, the hypothetical wins. Oh, if the SEC played this schedule, they would be 12-0. Oh, if Dylan Harper was on the court, Rutgers would be 21-0, despite the fact they lost to Kennesaw State and Princeton with Dylan Harper on the court. Almost lost to Seton Hall with Dylan Harper on the court. I think they would be better offensively without Dylan Harper, right? I don't think he's as bad a defender as kind of we're insinuating here, right? I really don't think he was the one reason they were struggling defensively. I think clearly it's been the horrible play inside, the complete inability to guard the rim, and the inability to force turnovers. That's been the bigger thing here. But I think whatever Dylan would have lost them defensively, I think he would have doubled up offensively. Would have not only for himself, but would have opened up Ace Bailey, because you can't double Ace Bailey and leave Dylan Harper going 4-on-3 like that. That's a death sentence. So certainly having Dylan Harper would have helped. Yes, but to your point, like there was a chance to win this game because they played well enough defensively and they had enough open looks from three to win this game offensively. They should have scored more than 63 points when they're shooting 35 threes, so many of them open. And again, maybe Ace Bailey hits 1 or 2 instead of going over 7, right? Maybe Zach Martini goes 2 of 4 instead of 1 of 4. Maybe PJ Hayes hits 1. Like you're 1 or 2 away, but it's hard to complain about 3-point luck when JaMychal Davis goes 4 of 7 and Tyson Acuff goes 4 of 8. Like you're not going to get better 3-point luck than that.
Yeah. In uncomfortable press conference moments, this week's episode of Uncomfortable Press Conference Moments, you asked a couple questions to Steve Pikiell about Dylan Harper coming back. It's interesting. I mean, every sense I get around the program is that he is going to come back. And yet Steve's answers are not, hey, he's coming back. They're very vague, purposely vague. I don't know if he's trying to protect if he's playing the Shiano game of we're not going to talk about injuries or what the situation is, or if he really doesn't know, if there's still some unknown about it. But it's interesting. I'll say that.
Steve is difficult to read with injuries because if it's a hangnail or a high ankle sprain, he'll answer the same way. They're working hard to get back. They're doing their best, all this stuff. Like you think that, Dylan Harper would play against Illinois the way he spoke about it, but clearly, and this is why I pressed him on it, because I don't want to play this game every game where it's like, oh, is Dylan Harper going to play today? He has a high ankle sprain, as Steve has mentioned 2 times now. A high ankle sprain is not something you recover day to day. It's a week to week. This could take a month, 2 months, 3 months, depending on how bad the grade is, right? We don't have the medical report in front of us, but this is more likely a long-term injury than something where suddenly against Illinois, he's going to come out on the court. So I was trying to get to it, like, is there a chance his season is over because of this injury? And I think the answer is yes. I don't think it's definitive. I certainly think it's possible he comes back by early March, by the Big Ten tournament, right? And I think that's why they haven't ruled him out. Rutgers has clearly said guys are out for the season. They said Manny Obole was out for the season when his knee injury was deemed out for the season. So I don't think they think he's out for the season. I think they clearly believe there's a chance he comes back, but I think the reality is there's a chance he doesn't come back. And I think that best case scenario, if you're Rutgers, again, this falls into what I thought would be best case scenario, is you kind of just sit him out, rest him up to 100% for early March. He comes back at his best and helps you try to win the Big Ten tournament. But again, I just think it's good to have in front of us the idea that he's not going to come back against Illinois. He's probably not going to come back the game after, and we're not waiting on pins and needles before every game. Like, is this the game Dylan Harper comes back? It probably, again, based on Steve's answers, he's going to try to come back as soon as possible, but I would be shocked if that's within the next week or 2.
Yeah, I'd be surprised, Pat. I just think he's going to play sooner than later. I just didn't get a sense that injury was as serious as we're making out. I get he's in a boot. I get it's a high ankle sprain, but he wasn't,
Like, what was the Michigan State Garden situation just like a decoy, like a media exposure? Right. Like that's the whole Fugazi part of this whole thing. It's like what is going on, and it being on the Rutgers Rant and never being able to identify or specifically talk about injuries because of coaching situation, like the way the coaches handle these questions, is just infuriating. So I can only imagine if you're a fan, because it's just like you want answers and you're never going to get them. So instead of hypothesizing, I'm going to stay out of this. I did that enough during football season.
Let's dispel like the idea, and I bought into a little bit, because people say, well, he's going to shut it down because he doesn't want to hurt his draft status. I mean, I've talked to people who say the draft status is unhurtable, right? Like there's only these 50 players in the draft. He's one of the best three. Nothing that happens here is going to change the reality that Dylan Harper is going to be drafted at the top of the NBA draft. And just because I'm getting questions about this again, people see he's out and there's that, oh, maybe he needs another year of college to improve. No, Dylan Harper's not coming back to college. Neither is Ace Bailey. You stop. They're going to the NBA draft. They're going to be drafted in those top 5 picks. Already lost my relax. The Rutgers relax is already over.
Serenity now, Steve. Serenity now.
Serenity. Okay. Talk amongst yourselves. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Give Otis a pat. Give Otis a pat
Where's
over
my
there.
dog? Come here. You're a good boy.
There are 2 pretty undisputable facts here, right? Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are going to be top 5 picks, right? I just cannot, unless there's some like Latvian kid in the middle of Europe that I have no idea about, like that surpasses them. I think they're pretty safely top 5 picks, and they're not coming back to Rutgers. I got an email this week too, Steve. It's unbelievable. I thought we were past this too. There's a 0% chance to come back.
He's not. Never. We're coming back. Never under any circumstances. Ever.
No, never, ever. Right? It's just a matter of will Dylan Harper come back, and when will he come back? I think he will come back at some point this season, right? I mean, clearly he's tried to play under suboptimal conditions. He probably shouldn't have even tried to play against Michigan State, and he gave it a shot. So I think that if it's like a 50-50 shot, he'll lean towards playing or not. So I think he will come back. The question is when. I think it's closer to the Big Ten tournament than it is, at any point in February.
All right. Yeah. Oh, well, we'll see. I guess we'll find out. So let's go through this now, and I think we're past the point of saying, here's what they need to do to make the NCAA tournament. They need to win the Big Ten tournament. To make the NCAA tournament, we can stop playing they've got all these, look at the net rankings, not so bad. Guys, it's just, this is the reality. The schedule is brutal. 9 games left in the regular season. Starts with Illinois at the rack, and then at Maryland, Iowa, and then the West Coast trip at Oregon, at Washington. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot going on there. Brian, what's your what do you want to get if you're Steve Heichel, if you're a fan, what do you want to get out of this stretch now? I mean, what are you looking for?
Wins?
Yeah. Is that simple? Yeah.
I mean, look, it's hard for me to say, like, look for things into the future because the future is now. Like, the season that matters is right now. And you can try to help yourself feel better by thinking about, maybe you see Dylan Grant and Bryce Dortch and Lathan Somerville develop, and down the line they'll be good players. Like, there's not even guaranteed they'll be on the roster next year, right? So you can't even comfort yourself with that thought. Now, what I would like to see is, again, my entire focus, if I'm Rutgers, is what can we do to maximize our chances of winning the Big Ten tournament? They got to figure out some sort of rotation at center. They got to help Somerville defensively. They got to help Dylan Grant kind of fill in that spot a little bit better. They got to help Bryce Dortch continue to develop. He's been pretty solid as far as an effort guy. Like, he's good on the glass. He puts in a good shift defensively. Mm-hmm. He's just nowhere near ready to do anything offensively. Like, it is 4-on-5 when he's out there. That's the plain truth, right? So you can't kid yourself to think that he's going to improve there. But if you can make him a steady guy defensively, shore up the center, figure out the rotations, right? Like, I know some of this is matchup based, but PJ Hayes plays 1 game, sits out 3, comes in another, and he's just an example of a guy like I'd like them to figure out the situation and then get as healthy as possible, right? Give Jeremiah Williams a week off. He's clearly sick and struggling. Again, two games in a row where he couldn't finish because he's too sick. Let him rest. Dylan Harper, let him rest. I know they're probably going to have these guys travel to the games even if they don't play. That's been a question I've gotten a couple times. Why is Dylan Harper traveling and going to these games when he's hurt? Why isn't he home resting? I think it's fine that he travels, but that is something that people ask us. So just get healthy and try to find some glimmer of hope to gather, hope that your shooting gets hot, and win some games. I mean, there's 9 left, win 3. And again, obviously, it goes without saying, qualify for the Big Ten tournament.
Right. And you think the number's 3? This is a good conversation. Pat, give me your number. You've seen the schedule. Like, what? Yeah. I mean, you've got a couple that you should win.
Right, Washington,
USC, Washington, USC, Minnesota. There's 3,
and if you snipe one of them, you feel like then you can beat any. Like right. If you snipe like a Maryland or Michigan, on the second go around, right? Like maybe you start to feel like, all right, we can make this magical run. We can salvage this. So I think 3 is like the minimum to have a good momentum.
I mean, below 3, anything else would be a disaster.
Yeah, I would say so. I'll be the optimistic guy and say they can get 5.
5, yeah, I think 5's possible. But and then at least you're looking at a year. All right, so you're 9-11 in the Big Ten. Given all that shit that happened, I guess that's not terrible. I think it's more likely you're looking at 7-8, which isn't that what last year was? What was their record in the Big Ten last year? 6 and
7-13, I think,
7
which
and
is what they're
13.
projected to finish in Ken Palm and Bart Torvik, which is why I say
Right.
3 is kind of the number here, right? I think the wins have to come against Washington and Minnesota because those are your direct competitors for the Big Ten tournament position. To Pat's point, like they have beaten one good team so far, which is UCLA. Their other wins in the Big Ten are against Nebraska, Penn State, and who am I missing here? Northwestern. 3 teams that you're in direct competition with for the Big Ten tournament. So at least you have that taken care of, right? You're above the bottom tier, but to feel good about yourself going into the postseason, you got to beat somebody that you're going to meet in the semifinals or quarterfinals or whatever the tournament. You know, maybe that is Purdue at Mackey. They seem to finally always have their numbers. Maybe it is Illinois this week, right? The other thing is that I wrote about yesterday, the home court advantage of the RAC, where even the worst teams Rutgers has had, you think they would always have a shot against these good teams. It feels like it's kind of gone because, like, I mean, they've lost 3 of their last 4 there. They've lost 11 of their last 18. And, you know, at no point do I feel like, okay, the RAC magic is going to carry this team to a victory, especially not this season. It just hasn't felt like it's been there anymore. You guys have been at the RAC, obviously, this year. I don't know if you guys feel differently, but the numbers to me kind of scream like it's not there. The alternative that people have posted to me is that this team just isn't very good. So maybe that accounts for that. But again, Rutgers had won games it should never have won in 100 years behind the RAC magic. I just don't see it.
Right. All right. Hello, doggy. Okay. Let's move on. We got some questions this week from, lots of questions. Good questions. Most of them about Dylan Harper coming back. He's not coming back. So just cross that one off. NIL has been a topic of conversation. Can Rutgers get money from somewhere to compete with the big players? Where will NIL money come from? It's one typical question. We've heard it a million times. Honest question. What is Greg doing to raise his NIL profile, or is he counting on future direct payments? Because it seems like he's done a great job retaining players, hitting the portal, and off to a great start with the 26 class. There has to be some money being thrown around to get these results, right? Yeah, there has to be some money. I think football had some money left over. They lost a lot of guys who were getting paid. I think that's part of it. I think they might have had they had more in the kitty this year than they have had in previous years. That's Greg Schiano's fundraising, I think, in a lot of ways. And I do think that there is some, these programs have been told to spend the house settlement. Like even when it was up in the air, it now looks like no matter what happens, even if the settlement doesn't go through, the NCAA is still going to go through with this. Like this, they're too far down the road now not to have the money paid to the players. So I think Rutgers has been anticipating that. I think it's part of what you're seeing here. But to the basketball question, I mean, this is this is the problem. I mean, this is where we're at. Like these other schools have more money in the kitty. I mean, look at Michigan's roster. Why was Michigan bad last year and good this year? Huh? What happened? Well, magically, good recruiting there by Dusty May. Money.
Yeah, the house settlement too is really fascinating too, because if it does go through, there's also the whole back pay for athletes that were not able to compensate off of NIL from, I think, starting in 2016 to when it was passed. So that money is also coming from the NCAA, right? The NCAA has to pay $10 billion. So, right, in that settlement, that's another aspect of it. The money is allegedly coming just from the back pay of this NCAA deal. So that's where that money in the house settlement comes from. Sorry, that sounds like super confusing. Does that make any sense?
Olivia Dunn suing to make sure there's more money coming. I love that. Jersey's own. Yeah.
There you go. And also, like we've talked before many times, like Rutgers and Greg Schiano has done a great job fundraising privately for NIL. I think that's the other aspect of why you're seeing some of the results you're seeing from the football perspective.
Yeah, again, I do think that the revenue sharing is obviously the big pin here, right? Like, I think if the revenue sharing wasn't happening in the near future, I'm not sure that we'd see this, this giant surge, because Rutgers is in a position in one of the 2 leagues that matter that you're going to be able to fully commit whatever the percentage of the pie that you want to give, right? Like the ACC, most teams are not going to be able to commit $17, $18 million or whatever that teams in the Big Ten are. So that gives you a leg up on a lot of competition. And it gives you a pot of money that's not there. Greg Schiano probably has done a really good job in fundraising privately and finding these, these sources that previously were not donating to Rutgers athletics. The truth is that Rutgers athletics is one of the worst, if not the worst, university in the Big Ten in receiving private donations. It's been true across its tenure in the Big Ten. It's been true before that, right? And that kind of bears itself in facilities and in NIL. So I think that barring a complete reversal of decades of history, the only obvious, the Occam's razor here is that suddenly they're getting this infusion of cash from the media rights deal that they can use themselves on players, and that's why suddenly they're getting better players. Because I don't think the sugar daddy that we keep alluding to on this podcast every once in a while isn't there. I just think they got money from legal sources now through their media rights deal and all the house settlement.
All right, more questions. A lot of people wanted to start already looking at next year's roster. Which player is most likely to leave the program and transfer out for next season? That's a bit of a negative way of putting it. Let's look at the building blocks, and I think this is important to remember. Like if Steve Pikiell gets the money, like part of whatever that's $20 million, Steve Pikiell's going to get about $3 million. You would hope, right? So he's got $3 million to build a roster. His starting center, Latham Somerville, is going to get some of that. Dylan Grant's going to get some of that. Like he's got building blocks that you would think that these are guys he wants to keep that are going to be Big Ten players that he's going to be able to pay in a way that maybe another program is not going to be able to just come over the top like with an offer like they did with Cam Spencer. Like, I'm talking about like there's going to be some money for these guys that they might not be able to get elsewhere. I think that's one reason you'd hope for optimism. I think Jordan Durkak's part of this core. Like, I don't know why he would want to transfer another year. A Bryce Dortch is interesting. You would think he's committed enough to burn his red shirt to this program. You'd think that would mean he's committed enough to stay, but now people have seen him and kind of see what he's all about. So that might make it easier for him to be poached. Like, I don't know that there's any one guy that I am super worried about losing on this roster. Am I wrong?
Okay, so Bryce Dortch is not going to be poached. I mean, let's be clear here, right? Like, I think he really doesn't have many options too. You have to consider that as well. Like, guys can leave wherever they want, but sometimes you got to be a guy that has options, right? Like Latham Somerville, if he elected to leave, would have options no matter what. He's a highly ranked high school player with some film and some potential shown this season. So we'd have to sit down and really break this all down, right? But there will be a lot of spots to fill between Dylan and Ace graduating. Jeremiah Williams has another year of eligibility. Is he coming back? Manuel Bole has 2 years left, but he's 24 years old. Does he want to come back? Does Rutgers want him back? There's a lot to figure out here. I think there are probably two guys that you really, really, really want to keep: Dylan Grant and Latham Somerville. Latham Somerville is the future of this position of this program at center, and clearly that's a position that Rutgers has seen is very difficult to get a guy out of the portal, no matter how much money you have. So he's probably priority number one. Dylan Grant is priority number two because he's just the conventional Steve Pikiell 3-star kid that's going to overplay his rating, right? He plays hard and clearly has shown things there that you could see them developing in. Other than that, I think you're right. You expect Jordan Durkak to come back. I just don't know. I think you're going to be in a complete rebuilding mode again this offseason. It's going to be very interesting to see how this kind of all breaks down. But you're right. There's a month left in the season. Let's save this for mid-March.
All right. Jump into some other topics of interest. I like people who really dialed into this stuff, who are interested in like the behind the scenes stuff. This is a question about the press conferences. So my question is, no one asked Durkak a question at the post game press conference yesterday. Isn't there some sort of pact with you writers to make them all feel appreciated? He deserved to be asked. Jordan, you seem to annoy some or all of the Michigan team yesterday. That must have been enjoyable. I guess that's the question we could have asked. It's interesting because this is how it works. Like, they bring two players and coach, sometimes three, and Pikiell's only there for the part you see on wherever you're watching it, on the radio, listen to it on the radio or online, wherever it is. And the players stick around. So, like, for a lot of us, like, why would I ask Jordan Durkak a question at the podium in front of everyone when I could walk up and get him with 2 or 3 guys around him? That's how I've done it. I think that's kind of just a flaw in their setup. Just the way they do it. Like, we can't tell them how to do their press conferences. And then sometimes they'll bring in a guy who we didn't request, which it really hasn't happened a lot this year. I mean, for the most part, we've gotten the guys we've needed Brian. I mean, a couple times maybe, but I give him credit for bringing the freshmen out a lot more than I thought they would. So yeah, that's how it works.
In this case, I could speak only for myself. I requested JaMychal Davis and Ace Bailey afterwards, and I know at least one other writer requested Tyson Acuff and JaMychal Davis. I don't know if anyone else requested Jordan Durkak. It's certainly possible.
Right.
I don't ask players questions at the podium, one, because of what you said. We get them on the side. You only get Steve Pikiell for 8 minutes, right? Listen, I'm not going to throw out a token question to make somebody feel good, right? Like if Jordan Durkak had the game-winning three-pointer, I think we'd all be asking questions. I just don't know if it's worth burning a question in your 8 minutes at the podium, especially when, like you said, you get them on the side.
Exactly. Yeah.
The optics are fascinating. Yeah, like what's on camera and what's not on camera is also, like you pointed out, Steve, right? Those guys are sticking around too, so they're answering a lot more questions than people know.
A lot of questions about the defensive coordinator's job. I got to be honest with you guys. I've tuned this out. Like, and I get it. I get these. What about? I get emails like, "What about Chris Hewitt? What about?" Guys, I've just stopped thinking about it. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, he's gonna pick a DC. It's gonna be someone we're not expecting currently. Like, I think that's clear. And it's that's it. I mean, he's taking his time. I don't think there's any crisis. I think he tried. He tried to get Heatherman early on. I made a lot of money with the Miami. Okay, I've got time. And so there's no spring practice is 2 months away. Like, I'm just not. I don't know. Do you guys have insight that I haven't seen?
No, but it's one of those situations where, right, like Greg Schiano has been burned in the past by having information leak out in the hiring process, and that's part of the reason why he's super tight-lipped about who's interviewing and things like that. So you can ask around, but no one's gonna be leaking anything to the press. It has no value for them. So
one of the reasons why he's just a control freak, also, Pat. That could be the other reason why he doesn't want. He wants to drop this
a big part of the job, right? Like
exactly.
This isn't a situation where like leaking things or doing anything like that is going to make this hire better, right? Like the top candidates already have gone their ways and shopped around, right? So he's going to make the right choice. He felt very good about his coordinators. He did a great job picking Harris Simiak out, plucking Harris Simiak, having Heatherman on the staff. Look at his career rise. So you got to feel confident he's going to make a pretty good, smart, selective hire.
Tomorrow is going to mark 2 months since Harris Simiak went to UMass. That's a long time, right? And as much as there are reasons, right? Like there was the transfer portal, and there was bowl prep, and then there was high school recruiting. Like today is the first day of the dead period. So in theory, if they're going chronological order, maybe this is the period, right? It can't go beyond this week. It would be, if it goes beyond this week, I'm starting to think Greg Schiano is going to be the defensive coordinator, right? Because you're going to run out of bodies, right? But Chris Hewitt never was really a candidate, but he went to the NFL. Tem Lukabu was a guy we had on our hot board. Everyone had on their hot board. He got fired by the Panthers, and he's staying in the NFL. Heatherman was the priority number one, obviously, and then he got the contract extension by Minnesota that made it impossible to go to Rutgers. Then he goes to Miami. So at some point, you're running out of a pool of candidates too, right? Like you can say things aren't taking too long, the process is playing out, but 2 months is a really long time to hire a coach, right? Like I'm not crazy here, am I?
No, but it's. I don't know. I'm a little surprised. We're still talking about it, but they don't play a game for another 7 months. So I'm like, it's not 8 months. It's not a crisis. I'm not worried about it. Right. I don't know.
They attack the offseason priorities in the right order is I agree with you on that, Politi, right? Like they'll find someone to, right. Like it'll work itself out. So that's kind of how I felt about that.
Other than ending the questions about it, I get it. Some guys have been hired that maybe they've talked to those guys. I don't think you're going to keep a lot of these guys from leaving for the NFL. It's a better job for a lot of people. A lot of the candidates were above, like just silly candidates to begin with in the public eye. And so, I don't know.
Rutgers pays handsomely for this position. It's a Big Ten coordinator position. And it's taking 2 months to hire. Like I thought this job.
Miami pays just as much or more. It's not like, I mean, they weren't going to get Campanelli. He went to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, I don't know, like what candidate just come back to this? Like, all right.
And just think about the hiring of right, like Shiraka and Harris Simiak was right, his coordinator hires before that were not necessarily these hot board candidates. That's the point I'm trying to make.
And the Shiraka hire was a crisis hire. Like for me, like he absolutely had to find someone who could rebuild this offense that he trusted. That one was like all eyeballs on this. He's a defensive coach. He cannot screw that up. If he gets a Gleason and he makes a mistake, it derails the whole thing. Like defensive guys, like, all right, it's going to be his defense. I mean, right? I guess it's just less.
I agree.
He's been adamant that he doesn't want to be coaching. Like his job is to be the general manager and CEO of this program, right? The more time he spends coaching the defense, the less time he is raising NIL and worrying about the big picture part of the program, which is why you'd ideally hire a really good coordinator, especially if you're going to spend $1.5 million on the guy. Right? I don't think it's a crisis, right? I'm not sounding the alarm that Rutgers is going to have the worst defense in the Big Ten. I just think 2 months is a long time, and there's got to be, there's got to be something. I don't know if it's wrong, but I'm starting to be alarmed that either the job isn't as attractive as you think, the candidate pool is just completely dried up. There has to be some reason this is taking so long. I refuse to believe it because it was planned out this way. I think in an ideal scenario, you'd have a DC hired in a month, not 2 months. They took them a month to hire Kirk Shiraka last time, and it was starting to ring alarm bells in my head that time. Now it's taking 2 months. Like again, it just.
We'll see who he gets. Yeah,
we'll find out. With me.
Yeah.
Yes, listen, if he hires, whatever, Pete Carroll. I know Pete Carroll's going to the NFL, but my point, like, if they hire a big name, then my point is moot. But I'm starting to think that whoever it is going to be underwhelming, obviously.
All right, good questions. We got a good what else segment here. We're going to jump to a little wrestling talk. I'm kind of fascinated with Bo Bassett. I don't know why I'm fascinated. That's interesting. A guy who's never in the history of college recruiting, because when someone's really qualified to make that statement about college wrestling recruiting, never in the history of college wrestling recruiting, said Steve Politi, who doesn't follow college wrestling recruiting, has there ever been something like this? Bo Bassett.
You're right, though. You're absolutely right. You absolutely nailed it. Like this, you are as plugged in as any wrestling person in the world, Steve Politi. So yeah, he's a really fascinating from two perspectives. A, he's one of the most prized recruits to come out of high school in a really long time. A guy that's succeeded immensely on the world stage already at his age level, and was very open and public about his recruitment, but not in the sense of like, I'm shoving this in your face to say, oh, I have all these offers and I can go anywhere. He wrote a blog, which was like fascinating. You could read about every one of his visits. It was just handled publicly and just completely differently than any other recruiting story, especially in wrestling. Maybe that's happened in basketball, but I can't think of anything like that, or even football, right? Like a person that's been this open and public and forward facing about all of his options. And here's why I'm thinking this. And he let you into his world to see this from his perspective. And it's been really fascinating. So
brilliant is what it is. Brilliant. Right.
He's signed by, I believe it's Resolite, which is one of the, not Resolite. He's signed by a big wrestling company, apparel gear company. Right. And big part of it was doing like things like this, right? He's built his profile. He's built his whole resume. Anyway, he's down to 7 schools, and he's going to announce where he's going tomorrow on Tuesday afternoon on Flow Wrestling. So if you want to watch that announcement, it'll be there. In no particular order, his 7 are Penn State, Ohio State, Oklahoma State, Iowa, Michigan, Virginia Tech, and Rutgers. And if you're thinking, does Rutgers have a shot here? People around the program seem to think that there's a really good connection between him and Steve Middich, the assistant coach, who's a Pennsylvania guy. It's kind of been close with the family, so there's some insight there. And also he was just at Rutgers last weekend. It was one of his last official visits, so he got to see the whole experience and take it all in, and that went well for Rutgers from everything that's been said. Yeah. So big announcement. It's pretty fascinating, and like he'd be coming in to step into the shoes of like an Ashton Soriano if he's not already has a higher profile than guys like that. So he's one of those guys that has instant national title power.
I believe that this is the guy who could march to his own drum and could come to Rutgers and do all that stuff if it weren't for the money thing. Because I just know too much now about the Rutgers NIL world to think they have anything to pay him, unless Scott Goody, unless he uncovered something and found a way to get this done. And I, like you mentioned, those people in Iowa are crazy. I'm sure there's money out there. Oklahoma State,
it's huge.
Sure, there's money out there. There's got to be. And they're sick of losing to Penn State. So there's like add another layer of this on there too.
Sure.
I mean, I would be stunned if he picked Rutgers. And again, as you know, I know nothing about this, as I just confessed. But still, so Pat, give me a percentage. What do you think? 10%, 5%?
What's 1 and 7?
That's better than that. Beat Virginia Tech. They're ahead of Virginia Tech.
I would think so. The lean is like you said, probably Iowa, Oklahoma State, Penn State, obviously, just being a part of that storied program. The really just to show you the reach of this kid, he had Micah Parsons, who was a wrestler, loves Penn State wrestling, obviously a football star for the Cowboys and Penn State. Tweeting at him like, we need you at Penn State. You want to be a part of this tradition. Like, this is a high school wrestler drawing the attention of Micah Parsons. That's how fascinating this has gotten. So it's really cool.
It's good stuff. Meanwhile, the wrestling team itself had a womp loss to Minnesota. You thought that they would have some momentum after beating Ohio State.
Illinois.
No,
yeah, it was a bad matchup to begin with, and then Rutgers just really did not show up in a lot of spaces. So it was a very much a womp loss. But I said on this last podcast, you could celebrate the Illinois win as much as you want. It was a great win, a great moment, like a monkey off the back type to say, all right, we finally got that snafu of beating a top 10 ranked team off our back. But the real measuring stick of getting to that next tier is, how do you stack up against Minnesota, Ohio State earlier this season? To their credit, they were right there against Ohio State. It came down to the last bout. They were not even close to Minnesota or Penn State for that matter, which is in its own right.
It's one thing. Penn State's one thing. Minnesota, I don't know. Come on.
Right.
Compete there.
Minnesota's good. Don't get me wrong. Very solid team up and down the lineup. They have one of the most storied wrestlers, Gable Stevenson, heavyweight. And he pinned Yaroslav Slavakuski. He's the first time he was ever pinned at Rutgers.
Really? Wow.
Just shows you how good Gable Stevenson, obviously Olympic gold medalist, coming back for his 6th year of wrestling after trying the WWE and the NFL. He said, "Oh, let's give it one more run here." In college, with my final year of eligibility, I'll win another NCAA title. So
I love the fact that he's at Minnesota too. It's perfect.
Well, yeah, that's how it starts, right? Like, he was the best wrestler in Minnesota. It's a great program, so why not? That's as we break down the inner workings of every single recruit ever. Put the spotlight on everyone. Like, a guy like Gable Stevenson achieved great success at his own state school with not much acclaim.
It is wild, and I get why, because it's happened in other situations, but he goes pro in one sport and is able, in 2 sports really, he becomes a pro wrestler in WWE, and he comes back to wrestle at 27 years old in college after a 2-year hiatus. How is this allowed?
Yeah,
right.
It's great.
Right.
Wow.
Also, it wouldn't have been allowed, right? Like, he would have lost his amateurism if this was 10 years ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Strange situation, and now he's probably gonna win the NCAA title, right? No one's gonna.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything else? And the women's basketball team lost again. I was watching it online. People yelling at me, "Why are you gotta be watching it? You gotta get the Big 10 plus." All right, we have it. Typed in Fonseca's password and watched it. Chris Ash, official at the Notre Dame. Love it. Fascinating. Get me to South Bend. Show up at that press conference. Big smile. We're buds now. Anything else?
The death of the Ledger, R.I.P.
Yes, the Star Ledger's dead. Julie Herman somewhere in Louisville, Kentucky, selling a townhome in the greater suburbs of Louisville, Kentucky. Woke up today without a printed Star Ledger. All right, Julie, tip my cap to you. If you don't understand that reference, folks, you have to Google it. I don't want to talk about it again. Well, I'll talk about it again. Julie Herman, to a class of journalism students, said she would be great if the Star Ledger went out of business. Yeah, different times.
It took her 11 years.
Took her 11. It was at 11. It's got to be longer than 11 years. It was only 11 years.
2014, I think. I was a freshman.
For record, the Starlet did not go out of business. Just to be clear, Julie, sorry. We're still a thriving newsroom, the biggest newsroom in the state. We just stopped printing a newspaper because it was a money drain, and this is going to look like a forward-thinking thing because all of these regional newspapers eventually are going to follow the same path. We are now just saving the money ahead of time and funneling it back into the newsroom. It's actually a brilliant decision. And mature, and it's tough. It was hard. It sucked. I delivered it. I love the Star Ledger. It was my life. I mean, it's the reason why I do this job. I loved it. But, you know, some guy like a shoe repair store. I mean, like there's the guy who had a best telegraph office in New York City one day. He's like, oh shit, this is it happens. The technology is improved. So sad day, but we had a great reunion. All the Ledger people came back yesterday. It was just a lot of memories shared. A lot of good people, a lot of good journalism over the years, but we're not, but I kept on saying that like, I'm still in the trenches doing it. We're still doing it. So.
Many people are happy to hear that. Some people are not. Maybe Julie Herman's quite not as happy to hear that, but many people are happy that we're still thriving.
Yeah, it's a shame, and I get it. Like people, I mean, some news coverage from 20 years ago. It has the Bob Mulcahy thing. It turned a lot of people off of the Star Ledger, and they were not going to forgive it. And I was not new to the paper, but I was not really involved in any of that stuff back when it happened. Certainly neither you guys were involved in any of that stuff back when it happened. But certainly from the days of Tom Lucci, who I talked to for a retrospective on the Star Ledger, he was great. From the days that no one's covered Joe Calabrese, no one's covered this Rutgers better than we have. So, and that continues. Anybody want to play some music? Love like the sad songs, memories, Green Day, maybe.
I'll change so in the background of this entire episode, I'm going to have this relaxing, calm mood music to match the Rutgers Relax vibe. I'll change it to the graduation theme.
Fine if it's.
I want "Time of Your Life" by Green Day. That's what we should play here. Perfect. That's what they played when Wayne Gretzky retired. They had the one time I ever got emotional at a press conference. This is a funny story. Like Wayne Gretzky's announcing his retirement, and they had this montage back before montages were like everybody gets a montage. But Wayne Gretzky's montage to Green Day was a hit. It was still a hit song at the time. Like all the stuff, I'm like, I'm getting verklempt. Wayne Gretzky's retiring. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, that dates myself a little bit there. Not that I haven't done that enough on this show. Anything else? Want to sign up there? No? All right.
I got nothing else.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Thanks for listening. Hopefully we'll be back, next week, talk a couple basketball games. Maybe there'll be a DC. Maybe there'll be another newspaper going out of business. Who knows what we'll talk about? But
Bo Bassett.
Bo Bassett. Oh, well, the Bo Bassett extra. Make me eat my words, Bo Bassett. Come out, Flow Wrestling. We'll do. Hey, if Bo Bassett picks Rutgers, emergency podcast. Emergency podcast tomorrow.
All right.
Done. Me, Lanny.
We can get him on.
45 minutes of freaking wrestling. Can you imagine? I'm going to Google him. I'm going to Google his name. I'm going to know things about him. I'm going to be ready. Bo Bassett.
I thought you were going to say, if Bo Bassett commits to Rutgers, I will wear a Rutgers wrestling singlet to the next Rutgers.
I'm not putting on a singlet. Goody, get me a shirt. I want a t-shirt. I'll wear it, though. I'm going to check his pockets, Goody. He's going to second mortgage on his house if Bo Bassett goes to Rutgers. Something's happened there. All right. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll be back next week.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at nj.com/insider.